Hi, it's Paul Camillos. Welcome to Series 6 of Shooting the Breeze. Join me and my co-host Jacinta Govind alongside the STB crew as we cover women's hoops and women in hoops. We'll share conversations and get a little deeper with inspiring players, amazing coaches, and the legends from behind the scenes. Especially in this series, we'll be talking to dream chasers that give it their all and lead with their heart.
So the lines between being an employee and a college athlete, on scholarship to fulfill your duty on scholarship is starting to get really blurred because I think the demands on the athletes have been changing so much.
Well, yeah, especially with some of those East Coast colleges now moving over to West Coast conferences, they're literally going to be crossing the country multiple times through a season just to be able to play. In this mixtape episode, we're celebrating our belated 4th birthday. We get into some STB listener hot topics, such as thoughts on gambling in the sports ecosystem and Caitlin Clark after our recent poll. Our crew also keep it real as we ride the ebbs and flows of some phenomenal growth and changes for women's basketball and navigate the growing pains. We revisit some past pods around NCAA, WNBL, WNBA, Tauihi in New Zealand, and UK hoops. Listen out for some deep cut mythology references as we let off some steam. So strap in for a monster STB mixtape, and thanks for joining us on our belated 4th birthday pod. Enjoy. Welcome to Shooting the Breeze. Joining me, my co-host Jacinta Govind, and this is our late 4th birthday. We never seem to get them on time.
No, that's okay though. I mean, you're not supposed to, the older you get, you're supposed to keep forgetting your birthday, aren't you?
Yeah, so they tell me.
Same goes for podcasts, I think. And podcasts feel like they age differently to humans in the same way that dogs age differently.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So it's kind of been interesting because we got some feedback from some of our followers about what they wanted to hear about on this one. And I was surprised. Well, one of them I was surprised about, the other one I wasn't. The one that surprised me was they wanted to talk about gambling.
I was surprised by that as well, actually.
Yeah, it's that whole, do you compromise for the growth of the game? And I'm pretty cut and dried on that one. The answer's no. Partly because I've seen on social media some of the comments that get made towards the players if a team loses, where it's like, oh, you guys, you played really badly. You cost me this. It's all your fault that I lost, and it gets much worse after that. No, it just shouldn't be. You see, the thing that surprises me is you get teams that are like, they participate in the state-based, let's keep gambling away from sport, but the league takes gambling money. So I don't know. I struggle with this one.
I think it's something that's always going to exist. There's people that are always going to be profiting and losing because of it. Like, it's not ever going to go away. And we know that basketball, being a sport with a lot of variables, is always going to be a popular sport to bet on.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure it's still one of the most popular, if not the most popular sport in Australia to bet on. I think what's a bit of a shame is that a lot of other online content from some different outlets, a lot of their content is sponsored by gambling agencies.
Yeah.
And it's really disappointing that the only way that some of these outlets can further their reach of their content, that, hardworking journalists who have cut their teeth in the industry can really flex their muscles to their full capabilities, is only by riding the coattails of a gambling sponsorship.
Yeah, they've got these huge buckets of money that they can throw at everything, and it becomes kind of easy. All of a sudden it's just like this constant stream of money. And you see it's the same with pubs and clubs. Pubs have lots of poker machines. You've got to have the gambling, otherwise people won't come into the pub. And I suppose it becomes easy money, and therefore you don't have to be as innovative or find different ways to bring people in and to engage with people because you've got this stream of cash coming through. But what it does is it tends to get it to the point where, you've got kids who can quote odds before they can quote stats.
Yeah, that's when you know that gambling is really detrimental, when it's rubbing off on kids like that. And that's not a particular type of norm that you want to encourage for the next generation. And I think, like, just going off from my last point is that, some of our peers getting to create great content because it's funded by a gambling company, it also then puts some of our peers in a position of receiving that negative feedback and that abuse online, because they're now associated with those gambling companies. And then, if they're giving sponsored posts that are tips, they are receiving DMs from strangers, but also from, acquaintances saying, oh, hey, who are you tipping for this particular game?
Yep.
And it puts some of our peers in a really peculiar and dangerous situation where if they get it wrong and the person has bet however much, then they're getting in trouble for it, and not the person is taking no responsibility for the decision that they made. But when it's now trickling down to kids, that's really, really concerning. And it also completely invalidates the point of the game. The statistics are there for whatever reason. Ultimately, they're there for coaches and players and I suppose fans to help measure performance. But it is also, as we said, variables for gamblers. And now if kids are only seeing statistics as variables for gambling and knowing odds better than statistics, then that completely invalidates parts of the game. And that's not what the point of the sport is.
That's right.
But I'm pretty sure that I think from this week, you won't be able to use credit cards or digital currency to place bets online anymore. So online and telephone wagering operators won't be allowed to accept payments using those methods anymore.
Okay, well, that's a good step in the right direction.
Yeah.
Look, I'd like to see gambling ads not showing up during games. Like, there's nothing worse than, you're watching a game and then an ad comes up saying, hey, use, pick an online gambling service and you can put your bets down and you won't lose if you're so far ahead after this or that or the other, or even better, bet with mates.
But I think now that this has come into action this week, a lot of those ads may have to change because ultimately the appeal of those ads and having those gambling apps is that it's so easily accessible. Once you've created your account, you've linked it to a card, and it's just easy. Click of the button from your couch, like you said, with your friends at a wedding, whatever. But now that that's been taken away, those ads are almost going to be a little bit redundant because consumers can no longer do that.
Well, I really do hope that's what's going to happen, because, and I actually read something, and it does relate to rugby league, but they were saying that kids can quote the odds for games and, how many points the winning team will win by and whatever. Now they can just rattle it off. And that's telling you that it's effectively setting up the next generation to be the next round of gamblers.
Yeah, that's right. But hopefully this credit card ban will kind of stop them in their tracks. I'm sure there'll be a loophole or something. But yeah, it's not very encouraging when kids are already getting primed to know odds over stats. The other thing is, it's really interesting. I don't think that when we say that basketball is one of the most popular sports to gamble on in Australia, I mean, obviously the NBA is probably at the top, but I don't think people realise that it's even at NBL 1 level. So I think it was a couple of games ago here up north where someone at Auchenflower, where the Brisbane Capitals play, had to be asked to leave the stadium because they were doing that thing. I can't remember what it's called. You might know. But when someone's in the crowd and they're relaying the score to someone back at base who's connected to some kind of online gambling thing, they got caught at Auchenflower on an NBL 1 game and had to be asked to leave. So people are going to the lengths of doing NBL 1. The times when I commentate FIBA tournaments, even when I commentate FIBA Women Africa qualifying tournaments. We're encouraged to interact with people in the YouTube live chat, but they're all gamblers. So the only thing they're putting in there is like, oh, I think this team's going to win by 50. And I'm like, okay, great. Now we can generate some conversation. But they're only saying that because that's what they've bet on.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole bunch of numbers with decimals. And then it took me a long time to figure out that it's just a bunch of gamblers betting on things like FIBA Africa Women Qualifiers. Like, it gets really, really dire.
Yeah, and that thing's called court siding.
Court siding, that's what it is. Yeah, court siding. So it's happening in our backyard.
Yeah, and you see the signs up at all the stadiums. Actually, we got to see a game down in Canberra over the long weekend, and there was the big signs, no court siding. But yeah, I think this one's going to be around for a while and be interesting to see how it pans out. I'd like to move on to the other one that our listeners brought up, which is Caitlin Clark. We put a poll out, about the Kennedy Carter incident, and the feedback was from 91% that they thought she was being targeted. I'd like to hear your opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of it has to be a case-by-case basis.
Yep.
There has definitely been times where I feel like Caitlin Clark has been targeted during play, for sure. That incident that you were referring to when the Indiana played Chicago Sky, for sure. That contact was out of context of play. It really had nothing to do with Caitlin, the play on the ball. It had nothing to do with nothing.
Yep.
And she got shoved. I mean, tell me that's not being targeted. Yeah, so I certainly think there are definitely examples where Caitlin Clark has been targeted, but I also think there's times where there are examples of just the increase in physicality from going to college ball to WNBA, and that's to be expected.
Yep.
And based on the interviews and articles I've read where Caitlin Clark has been interviewed, she's very aware that a lot of it is physicality just because she's now playing with the pros. Mm. She's accepting of that and was expecting it. But some of the other stuff, it's just dirty tricks, I think.
Yeah, look, I think, like you said, case by case, she's being targeted from time to time. Definitely that Chicago Sky one, there was like, the ball wasn't even in the same state when she got hit. And there was an incident I think it was this week where, I can't remember which game it was, one of the players was trying to make out that she was flopping from a contact. Look, I saw the footage, it didn't look that way to me, but, like you said, you're stepping up the physicality. It is a tougher game. But I also think, there's been a ridiculous amount of criticism aimed at her that is just way out of line. But also, to be fair, I think that a lot of that criticism has come from the fact that everybody has built her up to be, this great shining light that's coming into the WNBA, and she's going to help propel the WNBA to the next level. And first of all, that's a really unfair amount of pressure to put on somebody straight out of college. But also, that is going to create some players who are going to feel like, well, that's not right. We've been here for a lot longer, and look at all the work we've been doing, and, you're basically putting us to one side. And it's just, you can't basically say that one player is going to propel the league to another level. It's just not the way it works.
Yes and no. She has certainly helped put, especially in the last 2-3 years, helped put women's college basketball back on the map.
Yes.
I mean, we saw the huge numbers of Iowa versus UConn in the Final Four in the most recent NCAA tournament that had record viewership, and that has very successfully transferred to the WNBA draft and now her debut, where memberships for clubs have been selling out, games have been selling out, games have had to be moved to bigger venues. And I feel like while she isn't completely responsible for all of it, she's certainly in the middle of all of it. So there's definitely athletes around her of her generation. Like, this is a a renaissance kind of generation of college athletes as well. But had they not received the extra media attention, we may not have known about them. We may not have been missing out on all of this talent, like the Angel Reeses, the Cardosos, the Paige Beckers to come next, the Cameron Brinks of the world. It's an exceptional class, and had they not gained that media attention, we may have missed out. So it's really cool that that's now transferred from college to the WNBA, and that the hype continues. And now it looks like we've started to attract a lot of those passive fans who are starting to chip in online with their, interesting opinions sometimes. So I think yes and no. Yes, Caitlin can be credited for putting women's basketball more in the forefront, but to say that she's completely responsible, I think, is also untrue.
Yeah, it's like you said, there's an amazing amount of talent that's come out of college this year that's transferred into the WNBA, but it's almost like while all these other players are there, the name that's constantly coming up is Caitlin Clark. And I think it's probably easy. It makes it easy for some parts of the media who are a bit lazy over there to just go, yeah, it's Caitlin. It's the Caitlin Clark effect. And it really, and I'm not taking anything away from Caitlin Clark, but it shouldn't just be the Caitlin Clark effect. It's like I can't remember a year we've had that much talent, exceptional talent, come into the WNBA out of college.
It's been a long time. It's definitely been a long time. But if you were to ask Caitlin, she would be the first one to deny that she's responsible for this surge in interest in the WNBA and in women's basketball. She would be the first to say that the likes of her idols of Maya Moore and Candace Parker are the ones that helped pave the way to get her to where she is now. But I certainly still understand some of the frustrations of the existing WNBA athletes who have been grinding for a long time to get the respect and the attention and the admiration that they deserve for being very consistent and successful performers for a long time. So I definitely understand their frustration that it took, this young rookie to help them be household names. Even the likes of Brianna Stewart, she won 4 back-to-back, pretty sure it was 4 back-to-back college titles with UConn. Probably the only person to have done that. So she has the argument when people say, is Caitlin Clark one of the best female college ballers ever? Stewie has very rightly said, well, no, because she never won a championship. So you've got to have that under your belt. But it still does at least starts a few more conversations around people like Stewie and Sabrina and alike who, have already had their own shoes.
Yeah.
And it's taken someone else to help as almost like their gateway drug into the W, only to find, oh, wait, hold on, there were all these other existing, very successful athletes with their own endorsements that we probably should have been paying as much attention to as well. So it's certainly a double-edged sword, but I think with everything, and this probably is going to annoy people, but you have to take the good with the bad. And I can understand why existing athletes are a little bit bitter and salty about how it's called the Caitlin Clark effect while they've been the absolute prime of women's basketball in the world for a long time and are now only getting attention now. But yeah, unfortunately, I think that's just, we can't really control that. That's just unfortunately how it goes. And I think I'd still rather what's happened now than not have any more attention at all.
Oh, sure. But also I think people have taken some of the comments that have been made a little bit out of context. So, Diana Taurasi said something, about, well, yeah, she's great, but let's see what happens when she gets to the W. And it got twisted into this whole other meaning of like, she's having a go at Caitlin Clark, which I don't think that's what the comment was about. It was more like, yeah, you're way up there in at college level. You come to the WNBA, it's a whole nother level again. We need to see how you're going to perform at that level, which I think...
Oh, yeah, absolutely. People forget, on paper, progressing through a sporting pathway from, say, going from college to WNBA, going from the COE to WNBL, on paper, it looks easy. But it's like you get to that next level and you have to start from the very bottom of that next level again and climb your extra 2-3 years to then be successful. I think people very easily forget that. And the amount of the unfair expectations and responses to when Caitlin Clark debuted in the WNBA this season about that whole thing. She had 10 turnovers in her first game and she's only scored 7 points and she's only done this. That was the perfect example of, well, yeah, like Diana said, she's good, but she's going to have to, let's see how good she can be now she's in the pro. She's going to have to start from the bottom again. It's just the rite of passage with any professional sport. But I think it's pretty reflective of a lot of people coming out saying, oh, she's only done this and she's only done that. It's more reflective of those people not truly understanding the game and the leagues than anything. So I try not to pay too much attention to those people who are all up in arms about how, quote unquote, poorly she's doing.
Yeah, look, I don't think she's doing poorly at all, to be really honest. You know, she's getting the numbers. Yes, she makes mistakes. Yes, she has off games. But how many rounds are we into the WNBA season? You know, you look at that and it's like, yeah, let's wait till we get to the back end of the season and let's see how she's improved over the length of the season. Then you can make some comments. But
to be fair, she's improved very quickly already.
Oh, yeah.
Like, seriously, to her credit, because like it's the increased level, not only physicality, as we mentioned, but the increased level of speed, the basketball level of IQ. So knowing that some of those passes and plays that she used to easily make at college and be such a standout for, she's going to come across now opponents who are able to anticipate that much quicker, that are going to be able to defend quicker. So all of those natural instinctive options that she would normally use are going to be going away. So she's going to have to very quickly learn, like, oh, I have to go to something else. And I mean, I think as of in May, she was averaging 17.6 points and 6 assists and 5 rebounds during the months of May in the WNBA. So you go from criticizing someone like her as the rookie for the 10 turnovers in her first game, and now she's already averaging near a double-double. Like that's an astronomical improvement.
It is.
Yeah.
It's stunning numbers. When you sort of sit back and look at, there's been 4 rounds of the WNBA so far, and she's improved so much over whatever number of games she's played. It's like, I really want to see if she keeps going on that trajectory, how's she going to be looking as we get further through the season. It's going to be a pretty standout season to watch. And while we're talking about WNBA, we wanted to talk about some WNBA stuff. So I think we'll just sort of keep that topic rolling a little bit. We've kind of touched on popularity and growth. But I think one of the things we need to talk about is the expansion. You know, the Golden State Valkyries and Toronto now. First of all, and you've made it really obvious, you really like those T-shirts.
Loving the Valkyries, branding, merchandise, the logo, the story behind the logo. I got completely sucked in, and my brother has very kindly reminded me that I said only 12 months ago that I would not support any team associated with the Golden State Warriors, and I very quickly forgot that. Very, very quickly forgot that. So we had a bit of a chuckle that he held me accountable when he said, you didn't want anything to do with them 12 months ago, and now you're sending me all these links to the merch that you want. And I said, you know what? I will take responsibility for that. That's exactly what has happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, love it. It's amazing. And you can see the impact of it. They haven't announced a team, a coach. All they have is the name, the branding, the merchandise. There were lines up down streets for hours just for the merchandise. There's already so many followers online. There's already so many members. I'm really impressed, obviously, by that stuff, but also the timing of the announcement was perfect because it completely capitalized in this renaissance of women's basketball that we are experiencing now, and picking an area that is already has such a great name with basketball thanks to the Warriors' success in recent years. It was just all very well crafted.
I think it's been one of the most professional rollouts of a team I've ever seen in any league, not just basketball, in any league. It's been smart. It's been the like you said, the branding, the logo. It's all really, really good. They keep people in the loop as much as they can. Crazy amount of interest in tickets as well. They're going to be a real higher performing team in terms of fan engagement, I think. And it's great to see. it's really fired up parts of the fan base for the WNBA that probably has been a little bit quiet. And also, it does one other thing. It means that there's more opportunities for some of these players coming out of college to be able to get a WNBA slot.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, I'm sure we've got even more talent to come out of college, overseas. I mean, we know how competitive it is to get a roster spot in the WNBA, and that's also reflective with the people we've already seen cut this year and in previous years. So having the expansion is great because I don't think they're ever going to be dry of talent to fill those teams. And what's really cool about having a new team at this point of time in the history of women's basketball as well is that I've had a couple of conversations with some of our peers who have already been involved in the basketball community for a while, and they're like, well, I followed the WNBA, but I never had a team. So now this is a good opportunity to follow a team from the very start, and it makes it an easier choice. And I kind of feel the same way because I have not still settled on a team. I think I loosely picked the Connecticut Sun, but based on some of their behaviour at the start of the season, I don't think I want to follow them anymore either. So yeah, it seems like being a part of something from the start, like a brand new franchise, is also really exciting. And I think that will help attract some of those fringe fans as well.
Look, I absolutely agree, and I think it's good to see that sort of expansion. Be interesting to see what happens with Toronto when they come on tap as well. And it's an interesting expansion into that Canadian space. So I know I've seen on social media there's been a fair bit of positive feedback on that. I think as they get a little bit closer, you'll start to see that ramp up as well.
But I think it's great that it's gone into Canada because, you know, just using the 2022 Women's World Cup as an example of how talented the Canadian team were. They're very competitive in 3x3. So again, just being able to create another pathway for more Canadian talent, helping grow in the game in an area where it's probably competing with the likes of ice hockey and things like that. But yeah, I think it's a really, really good move to put a Canadian team in.
Yeah, I think the WNBA's got some really good ideas and they're doing their strategic direction really smart as well. The other thing that comes out of this is we had our New Zealand correspondent, Lyndon, who was over in the US not that long ago, and she was in Minnesota and managed to catch a couple of games. We'll just have a listen to some feedback from Lyndon on this. Lyndon, I want to talk to you about the mini conference that you recently went to. And when we say mini, we're not talking a tiny conference. We're talking about Minnesota.
Yes, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I'll tell you the North American Sport Management Conference, that's what it was. It is anything but mini. It is one of the biggest things I've ever been to because you have, and just to give you kind of a contrast, where the Sports Management Association of Australia and New Zealand, so what we call SMANS, which is what I'm familiar with because I'm down here, that's like 100, 150 people, maybe 175 max. And then we do the European one, which is like 500, 600. And then the NASM one in mini, where I was, and that's even bigger than that. So it's anything but small.
You know, for people that are listening in, what did they cover at the conference?
Yes, what's really cool about the conference and what I love about going to as many of these as I can is that they're different topics, and so they accept abstracts for research and papers that people have done, and they break it into topics. And so there's sport marketing, there's fandom, sponsorship, there's sociology. The category I was in where I presented was communication. There's stuff in DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's stuff all the way down towards of sport ecology. And, you know, kind of you name it, it's there. And so kind of from a sport management lens, there was a lot on college athletics. There's, of course, a huge professional sports focus, especially in North America. So that's a lot of what it covered. And there was some PhD student stuff, which I was part of because I'm in that realm. And so there was a lot of different stuff. Like there was even the first session on the Wednesday was more for the lecturers in the room who teach capstone courses in university. So we even got to the point of, you know, the university system and internships.
Okay.
Is that more harm than good, and kind of working on that system. So it covered the breadth of things. There was a lot of panels about sustainability. There was one even about work-life balance for working in sport and in a university, and kind of how to draw your boundaries. And so it covered a wide breadth of stuff, which is why I like going to those.
But it wasn't just the conference either. You got to see a WNBA game.
Yeah, I actually ended up going to 2, and I didn't think I was going to get to both. So I booked myself for one, and then we ended up going to the second one, and that was like so much fun. And yeah, there was a Lynx, and man, they do such a great job.
You got to see the Lynx play. Who were those?
The first night, so the one I had originally booked was the Las Vegas Aces.
Yep.
And then the Friday night was the Venus Mercury.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And Beck Allen was unfortunately not there.
Ah, shame.
Yeah, I know. I was just like, oh, it's the first time I wanted to go in the course without Jazz and Amy and everything. But no, it was super cool. And what was nice about it was the Wednesday night one, so the Aces, and I'm so glad that I was able to get to both was because I kind of got to see it from different lenses. And what I mean by that was I just tried to cram everything I couldn't possibly with the Aces, just, that game, because I didn't know if I was coming back, and I hadn't been to this arena for the first time, and, I hadn't want to see this, and I wanted to see that, and I want to see it from like a marketing perspective, but also a women's sport person. And, then you have the Vegas fandom, which is completely separate. You have Kia Stokes jerseys, Kate Money Martin, of course you have the Caitlin Clarks, like all the Iowa fans, and then so that's the whole case study in and of itself. And then for the second game, it allowed me, I could actually, I think, watch the basketball a little bit more.
Right. Yeah.
And so I got to see both of those sides. But I'd say like probably one of the most interesting conversations I had was an employee at the merch store, the team store where you can buy merch. Yeah. Because I always go in there to try to scout a little bit just to see what's going on. And of course it's grown, and which is great. And so I went in just to try to see what jerseys were there. And I saw Alyssa Peely, which I was just so happy to see. Yep. Nafisa Collier, Diamond Miller, so then I started talking to this guy who works there, and I'll say they are extremely nice and accommodating. Yeah. And there was a shirt I was looking at, and they said, oh, like you and I were talking about before we got on air about like the sky walkways and stuff in the city. For those who may not know, because of the cold weather and even the warm weather, they want to stay out. So there's these sky walkways. Well, there's a Lynx store in the sky walkway. So they have a guy running up and back with merch. But while I was waiting, I was talking to this employee, and I said, so how do you guys just, decide which jerseys you're going to get? And he said, well, typically what happens is the W gives us the top 6 or so players who they think will sell. Yeah. And they said, okay, we want Peely straight away. That she's been selling, a lot of jerseys. And so, of course, with the lens I have, it's like, what about Alana Smith? He does, so interesting about Alana, we always try to have it a couple nameplates on hold, just in case family comes in or whatever. But if fans want them, and with Alana, with how well she's playing, so within the vicinity is they have a team of people pressing the names on the jersey.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's what I said. But what? He's like, if you want an Alana Smith one, like they're pressing it upstairs right now. And then sure enough, I went back before I left, and it was there.
Okay, so WNBL, take note.
Exactly. Well, actually, though, and this actually just sparked my memory to the Boomers RIP, but when I went, oh gosh, 4 years ago now, they had a small team store at the State Basketball Center, and they actually had the stencils that they could press on. Yep. I don't know if it was limited edition or whatever, but they were doing that. Yeah. But they're doing this in droves with the Lynx, and I don't know if other teams are doing it, but it was crazy.
Probably the other teams are doing it. Yeah. I know that they were doing it during the World Cup and the Asia Cup. Yeah. But it makes you realize that you got to have some way so that if you've got the fan that's coming in and they want a particular jersey, you got some way to be able to sell it to them. Otherwise, you know what? You may not be able to get that customer back again.
That's the thing. That's the essence of marketing, right? And it's just, especially with women's sport, and things we know people want it. The demand is there. Yeah. It's always been interesting for me to see how organizations and people respond to that. And it sounds like they're responding well. And, by the time I came back, it's like, whoa, like Alana's jersey is there. And they say, that I said, we do order other nameplates. There's a player who's having a breakout season or whatever throughout, we'll order the plate and then we'll make it and then it'll be available. And that was probably the first time I had seen, to an extent, like a W team in person have that available. And so that was a lot of my Wednesday. So most of the game was just spent talking to him and getting all these facts and learning. So that's why it was so great to have those two different perspectives. But then also I will say, like, I'm a little biased towards the Friday night game because the Lynx gave a block of tickets to the organization we were with. So there's a subcommittee for women in the group. So we call it Women in NASM. And so I didn't find out about this till the day of, but the Lynx released extra tickets. Here's how in demand it is. The original block from within the group like sold out immediately. And so then they opened up extra tickets. And so I actually went with a new friend I met there. So we got ourselves in. And so we sat with the group and we're waiting around, and somebody who's part of our organization said, don't leave, because after the game, you're going to meet Diana Taurasi.
All right.
Yeah. And we're like, so we all lost our collective minds and we're not moving.
No, that's a real good reason not to leave after the game.
Well, they said it because they had a meeting before we left for the game, and they said, okay, like we think something special is coming, but we don't know yet. We'll keep you updated, but like anyway, we're going to see you at the game. And then of course they come up during the second half and we're like, what? So there's a picture floating around. Somebody has it of a group photo of us with Taurasi.
All right. That's good. We need to see that one.
I want to see that one.
So there's been a lot happening in the NCAA as well recently. First of all, in this season, we managed to get Amanda Kristovich from Front Office Sports on, and also having James Jansen join us a couple of times, actually. But there's also a lot been happening in NCAA college hoops. I think we managed to get some really great insights from both of them. You know, getting James to give us some feedback on the experience that Davidson College had, particularly this season, was really interesting.
Yeah, with the injuries and things like that.
Yeah, and the fact that they decided that for the benefit of the players, that they'd sort of step back from the season because there was so much pressure on them.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And, you know, TCU felt the same, and UConn as well. Both of those teams were struggling with injuries. TCU going as far as having to have tryouts or adding some of the volleyball athletes to the squad just to make numbers. And I think, though, that's just, I mean, they're all three situations are just very unheard of. But I imagine that now that perhaps one of the flow-on effects from this so-called Caitlin Clark effect is that the college landscape is just going to change completely. The transfer portal has become its own version of free agency in college ball. And I don't blame athletes if they're in a position to go to a college where they can benefit from NIL deals.
Yep.
I say go for it. You've only got certain number of playing days in your lifetime. You're only going to be at your peak for a certain number of days. And, you know, like we said before, there's only so many WNBA spots. And if you realistically don't think that that's going to be you, and you can go and chase some great NIL deals with a particular college, go for it.
Yeah. To me, when you're in college, particularly given the limitations that they have because of NCAA rules, the ability to be able to make themselves some money through those NIL deals is so important for them. Obviously, there's been a lot happening recently in the NCAA about, you know, are the athletes employees or not? There's everything that's going on about that. So I think there's going to be a lot of changes through NCAA and college hoops across the board. And Amanda touched on that when we had her on the show as well, about the things that are happening in that space. I don't think I've ever seen US college ball being so all over the place in terms of how's it going to break down, the colleges changing between different conferences. I don't remember it ever happening like that before.
Yeah, that's a bit, that whole thing about changing conferences for TV deals and things like that, that's just gets so messy. And I mean, that's an example of some of the college athletes are getting a little bit criticised for changing colleges to get a better NIL deal, and see it as a bit more of a business transaction than being an athlete or whatever. But college sports has always been a business.
Yeah.
Like with these TV deals, I mean, these athletes will go to a particular college because the college is so good and the conference is so good. And then just for all the pieces now to be changed and thrown around for the sake of business and broadcast.
Yeah.
Like they're just kind of playing the same game in the game that they're already getting played in. And then I can't imagine committing to a college for a particular conference only to have that conference change, meaning that you have to spend more time on the road and going on away games. And so the lines between being an employee and a college athlete, you know, on scholarship to fulfill your duty on scholarship is starting to get really blurred because I think the demands on the athletes have been changing so much.
Well, yeah, especially with some of those East Coast colleges now moving over to West Coast conferences, they're literally going to be crossing the country multiple times through a season just to be able to play. And, and they're still expected to study and, hit their grades and be able to do all their college work. And, they're not getting sponsored. They've got to also be able to support themselves through college, which, if you've got a family that can back you, yeah, but there's some kids that just can't. They need to be able to find a job. So I don't know how it's going to work out.
Yeah, and people also forgetting they call it full-time study because between classes and the amount of time outside of classes you're expected to put into your course, it equates to full-time hours, like 40 hours, like you would do in a working week. So tell me how you're supposed to do 40 hours of study on top of traveling across the country, on top of going to your team things every day.
Yep.
It's just as well that kids do it when they're aged 18 to 20, 21, because there's no other time biologically in your life you're going to be able to withstand it.
Well, I mean, and it was a bit like, when we were talking to Lara Somfai, just her schedule, and that's a high school.
Yeah, exactly. And sure, it's great that she's going to be primed for when she goes pro eventually. And there's, as we've talked about in previous episodes, so many other good things that can come from this lifestyle of time management skills, social skills, communication skills that you'll need when you finish your work in basketball or finish being an athlete. But, it's still a lot.
Yeah.
It's a very accelerated course in life.
Oh, it is. And it's just the hours that they're pulling is just pretty astounding. But I think over the next few months, it'll be interesting to see how the NCAA pans out, because I don't think it's going to keep working the way it is. There's already, we're seeing the wheels are starting to fall off a little bit. I just read today that the US Congress is going to pass a bill that's going to say, or they want to pass a bill that says college athletes will not, by law, ever be able to be classified as employees. So it's like, really? Is the case for them being employees so strong that you've actually got to go pass a law to stop it happening? If that's the case, hang on. Do you think you maybe need to rethink the whole thing?
Oh, like the things that they choose to prioritize in America in their political system never ceases to amaze me. I mean, I'm not sure if you ever saw, but it was a good, I think, 6 months ago, how they had that complete inquest into TikTok.
Yeah.
And some of the questions that, the vice president or whoever high up from TikTok was there representing and defending them, the company, had to answer just questions about Wi-Fi and download and the way it was treated. It was, you would think it's an SNL skit, like it was appalling.
There's no question they do come up with the most stupid things, but I think in this case, seriously, if you're at the point where you've got to pass a law that says college athletes cannot be employees, if that's the lengths you got to go to, it's kind of saying that maybe, just maybe, you got to reconsider how you're looking at this. And I know it might end up leaving the NCAA a few billion light, but maybe you could find some way to pay them.
Yeah. But in the meantime, college athletes, if you can make some money off your own name, image, and likeness, you go for it.
Absolutely. And, speaking of being able to make money, let's sort of roll into the WNBL, because today, as we're recording this, we got the announcement that a 1-year CBA has been agreed. There's been some increases in pay. There's been some adjustments to the floor and soft cap, which is all good. But there's also this constant story. It's been there, and then we know that they're looking at it. The WNBL is looking for investment into the league itself to try and grow the league. I think if it's done right and if it's done smart, I think it's going to be really good for the league. If it's not done right, I think there's a potential for the league to, in the short term, grow, but in the long term, it might have some issues. But that's all up in the air. And there's also been all these other things that have gone on where we've had license transfers from Melbourne to Geelong, and now BWA has passed on a license to an investment group over in Perth. So there's a bit happening in the league at the moment.
Yeah, and there's definitely been a long silence And then there's been traces of news, but all in all, it's been very mysterious. And I think a lot of the changes are welcome changes, but I think a lot of invested and long-term fans of the WNBL probably get more annoyed by the mysterious communications or lack thereof than anything else.
Yeah.
We can have all the press releases you want indicating certain things, but just be really clear in terms of like, if you don't have anything to share or don't know anything, just kind of say that. Or if you are, like, I think there was a very unannounced press release from Basketball Australia about how they've started conversations with private investors. And I don't think that was posted anywhere. I think I had to see that on another alternative media outlet posted for us to even know that that press release was out. But then in the same release, they didn't have any like kind of measurables of how long the talks were going to go for, when they're going to make a decision, what the expected outcomes were. It was just kind of like, oh, hey, this is something we're thinking about, the end.
Yeah. My understanding is that they've been having these discussions going on for quite a while. Exactly when they're going to complete, I'm not sure. But look, it would be a good thing for it to happen. And as I said, if it happens the right way, it'll be great for the league. If it's not done quite right, there could be, further down the road, there might be some issues, but the devil will be in the details. So, hopefully something will come out. But as to your point about BA and announcements, I think it would be easier to be able to lay your hands on nuclear launch codes than it would to be able to get information out of BA. You just get these short statements that look like they've been massaged to the point where there's a whole bunch of words on a page, and if you really analyze it, it says nothing.
No. And that's what annoys people the most.
Yeah.
I think, it's like, okay, so you're meeting us halfway and releasing some information, and now your information still doesn't give us any indication.
Yeah, I think what should happen is, guys, listen to our 2 podcasts with Justin Nelson, because he says it really clearly. Take care of the fans. The fans need to know. They do need to know stuff. You don't have to tell them everything, but they're the ones that you want to keep engaged. And you want to keep them engaged because if you do that, they're going to also spread the word about what's happening in the sport. They'll spread the word about the sport. If you do not engage the fans, if you don't keep them up to date with bits of information, even if it's not, earth-shattering news, they're going to lose interest. And you got to understand, without the fans, there is no sport.
And I'll be honest, like we were talking offline before we started recording, I'm getting a little bit burnt out of basketball of late. And sometimes I think the first thing for me that I've kind of stopped paying the most attention to is all of those finer details of, okay, so when is free agency starting? Okay, it's delayed. Why is it delayed? What's happening with this? And me having to, choosing to find out all this extra information about what's going on, putting the pieces myself together. To be honest, I'm just tired of it. So sometimes now if people ask me particular questions for more information about what the new agreement might mean, I'm just kind of like, look, I don't know. Usually I would try and find out. Usually I try and share whatever, like if I had found something useful. But the fact that I keep choosing to find out the extra information, I'm too tired of doing that. And I feel like it's a lot of things that should be spelled out for me as a fan, and that should be more readily accessible than for me spending free time finding out the information that I want to know about the league that I care about. I'm pretty happy to just go back to being a passive fan and watching the games and seeing the score and saying who I thought played well, and that be the end of it. I don't want to go any deeper with it now because it's just exhausting. Yeah,
I can't disagree with you. It's like you get these announcements, there's very little information, you want to dig into it. It's actually it's a saga to try and find anything more. It's almost like the information's going through a gatekeeper who's saying, we'll let out these 3 drops of information, but the rest of it we'll keep to ourselves. Bad idea. Just bad idea. Let the fans know. Pick the 2 or 3 items that you don't want people to be across for whatever reason, but then give them everything else. Right?
Like, we're not returning the ring to Mordor. No. You know what I mean? It feels like a quest. We're going on a quest just to stay involved in a league and a sport that we have loved for so long. We're not returning the ring to Mordor. No. We just want to be fans of a sport in our leisure time. Like, stop making it hard for us, you know?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's like a Norse saga. You know, the Viking heads off into the distance and, you know, the story 6 years later comes to an end. It's like, no, we're not interested.
Yeah, it's... Yeah.
Yeah, no. You kind of want to say more, but you know you really shouldn't.
No. And look, I've already had a lot of fights today with agencies between having to call 3 different banks and to go on my own quest to the road to Mordor today. Don't think I have the capacity to do another one. But yeah, it's, I guess, you know, to put a bit more of an exciting spin on free agency and the next WNBL season. So I'll try and make some lemonade out of the lemons that I just picked for myself. Is that in a similar way, we were talking about the WNBA expansion and the excitement around the inclusion of the new team, the Valkyries, which, side note, I forgot to mention before, a few people reached out to me and asked how to pronounce the team name, which I thought was a little bit funny. Valkyries, as in the female warrior character from the Thor movies.
Yes.
But, you know, Geelong.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is sad that the Boomers are no longer technically part of the WNBL after being the longest serving club in the league, but opportunity to follow a new team, being Geelong. So it's going to be a whole brand new outfit, which is pretty exciting. It's going to be interesting to see how many of the existing Boomers fans are going to follow Geelong now, or if they're just going to pick another team. I doubt that they will jump to the other side of the fence, to the south side of the fence. But yeah, it's going to be a big adjustment for those Boomers fans, but it'll be interesting to see how many follow.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how many do make the change. I agree with you. I think there's a bit too much long-term bad blood between Southside and Boomers fans for that to happen. But what I'm excited about with Geelong is I've seen a lot of content coming out of the club. And if it's not about WNBL, it's about their NBL one. It's about things that they're doing. They seem to be a club that's really switched on about trying to get information out to people, which I'm liking. I think that's a great idea. They've had 2 announcements. There's Chris Lucas and Jazz Shelley, which we've seen. And now that free agency's opened up, I'm sure that we'll start seeing more announcements coming out of them. And I'm looking forward to it because I think also there's a strong basketball community down in Geelong and even going all the way back to the Supercats. So I think that's going to be a really big change for the WNBL, and hopefully they'll be able to have good crowds and be able to get a whole community behind them.
Yeah, and I mean, being a regional team, that's always up their sleeve. Yeah, going back to Geelong, like you said, already got a great basketball history with the Supercats, and I sensed a change was coming when last year the NBL 1 team changed to United. So I was like, okay, they're probably planning something, but I didn't expect them to go for a WNBL team. So that's great. So another regional team, which is good. Already an established basketball club down there. So I think it's going to be really, really positive overall. But it's just at the end of the day, as long as someone took the license and we didn't actually lose the team. Understandably, long-term Boomers fans upset that their team moved on, but we still have a team at the end of the day. But it was funny that, I think how the Boomers announced it, because there were a few rumblings that something was going on, and then I noticed that around the time of the end of the season, when it was awards time, their social media wasn't as active. So I don't know, there was a couple of things going on, but, you know, it was all speculation. But the other good thing is that Hoops Fest has been announced as well. So it's nice that those little inclusions continue to be little building blocks for the WNBL. And that looks like a really good tournament as well, that Hoops Fest. I'm hoping that there'll also be another preseason tournament in Brisbane, Riverside Rebound. I hope that happens again, because I think a couple of the teams that competed actually really, really liked it and that they were keen to do it again.
Yeah, that was good. I mean, I was overseas for work when that was on. The good thing was it was happening in the middle of the day for me, so I was able to watch during the lunch break.
Oh, yeah, that's lucky. But and then, you know, if we want to go as far as, you know, we've had the Geelong license. Now they know the Perth with the new ownership. I really, really hope at some stage Brisbane is going to get a WNBL team back.
Yeah.
Or South Queensland, somewhere in
Southeast Queensland, somewhere in that sunny coast down to Gold Coast. There's got to be one somewhere that they can get up. And we know from having spoken to Christy Collier-Hill in the past that's one of the key areas they're looking at for expansion. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out as well. But let's move on for a minute to our other regular international connection, which is the UK. And we had Cassie B on not that long ago, who was also just recently picked up the award for British Basketball Volunteer of the Year, which is so well deserved because she just does everything. But we had her on talking about that London Lions game where the London Lions got the Euro win. And I know for me, it was so good hearing about it from somebody that was there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I even had one of my friends from home attend the game, and it sounded like it was a great atmosphere, and what a great opportunity to witness history firsthand that now potentially may not happen again, given that the London Lions women's team sounds like it will be no longer next season. But yeah, first and foremost, got to give Cassie B a massive shout out for being the Volunteer of the Year award. Like, that's absolutely outstanding, not only to be recognised, locally amongst her peers, but at a national level by Basketball England, at that level to be recognised. Because when we have our chats here and there, she's always preparing for a game or some tournament or having to travel somewhere for commentating, and it's all off her own back. It is all voluntary. I think she mentioned the other day that she was doing a tournament where I think she was doing 12 hours worth of games, which is absolutely unheard of. And she said, they forgot to order food for us and provide our catering. So I have to try and find time to just at least buy some chips. And I was like, jeez.
No,
that's ridiculous. So she really, really puts in a lot of hard work. And I really honestly hope one day that has the opportunity to commentate at a higher level, like for Sky Sports or something. Have an opportunity to do a Euro Cup game, a FIBA game, something, because, she's just outstanding.
Well, even when she was on with us talking about that game, we had to wrap it up because she had to get off to some other game.
Yeah, that's right. She was like, I'm off. I'm prepared. I have to. She had other responsibilities.
Yeah, and this is totally off our list. I don't know if how many people are aware of this, but Sydney is getting a bar restaurant where they're only going to show women's sports.
I didn't know that. Where is it going to be located?
Somewhere on Oxford Street in the Darlinghurst area, and the place is going to be called the Ladies League. So we're going to have an Australian version of the sports bra, which is great. I think it's fantastic, and they're not open yet. They're in the process of fitting the place out and getting ready to open. So, hopefully it's going to be successful. And for people who want to watch WNBL and have a drink and a feed, there's a place in Sydney now where you can do it, and you don't have to argue with the barman to go and change the channel to catch the sport that you want to watch.
I wouldn't even bother asking for fear of ridicule. Yeah, no, I would just have to. I will shamefully admit all those times where there's no way you even bother to ask, hey, can you change it? You would just. Yeah.
Well, mean, you've got 60 screens showing the one rugby league game. Surely you can give us one to. Oh, no, can't do that.
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, Sydney can be a hostile place. I wouldn't want to put myself in a further position to be ridiculed. So I would not be asking. But the Ladies League, I've just had a look. They've already got a website and some social media profiles. So on Instagram, they're at Ladies League. It says coming soon in 2024 on Oxford Street, as you mentioned, Paul. And they've already got some posts there of some very sporty related posts. I'm really, really excited. This sounds great. And their Instagram story as well, as of today when we're recording. So obviously the story won't be there by the time people hear this, but it did say on their story that they're open to serious sponsors and investors who are looking for opportunities to get involved with the business. They said no opportunity is too small or too big, and they're open to any level. So if you're seriously out there and you'd like to consider sponsoring or investing in this business, you can email them admin@theladiesleague.com.
Yep.
I mean, if I didn't have so many fights with banks today, I'd be very tempted. It looks like that they may even have merch already because they've got a really good logo. See, this is me going down that branding rabbit hole again, like the Valkyries. They've already got merch. They've got a great logo that kind of looks like a very football, like soccer football inspired logo. It's great. Check it out. Check it out. That's a great tip, Paul.
And circling back again to Kiwi hoops, I got to say we've done a lot of stuff with New Zealand over the last 12 months. You know, Tauihi having Justin Nelson back on talking about what's happening in New Zealand hoops, and obviously also there's been pods where we've had Lyndon and Maya Williamson on. I find the stuff that's happening over in New Zealand really interesting, and I find that there's a lot of stuff that Australia could pick up and learn from what they're doing in New Zealand. And as always, you know, listening to some of the stuff that Justin talks about, it's always absolutely on the money.
Well, do you think that the recent CBA agreements for WNBL may have been influenced by what the Tauihi League offering?
Look, I think it's had some influence because, you know, as you rightly said before, players have a limited earning span in the sport. And, you know, while, yes, you do admire players who stay with a club from start to finish, realistically, they've got to go where they can do the best for themselves. I think that's just a reasonable thing. And if players couldn't get some sort of an increase or some, you know, a vision where they can see that they can do better, yeah, I think there would be players who would go to New Zealand to play. And also, you know, it is a shorter season. So literally, like, it's the first half of the WNBL season because after December, there's still, you know, another couple of months to play. So, yeah, I think it would have influenced the CBA to a point. I also think there'll be players who potentially would have been at the DP level, you know, the more senior DPs, who may not get an opportunity to play in the WNBL as a contracted player, who might look at Tauihi as an option.
Yeah, for sure. Work smarter, not harder. And
I'm going to play something now from Lyndon talking about New Zealand, how she feels about about her involvement with Shooting the Breeze over the last couple of years. You know, one of the things you've really gotten to, especially over the last 12 months, we've done a bit. You came over for the Kudos game. You've been up in Queensland doing some stuff. There's the things that you've been doing in New Zealand. You know, there's a lot that's been going on for you. And so it'd be great to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's when I tell you I'm living the dream. This is exactly what I've always wanted to do. And I'm serious. Like, I get the biggest smile on my face just thinking about it. And to be able to go over to Australia, the Kudos game has been a core memory. And I'm so glad that I made that last minute decision and decided to go. Because I knew I was going to regret it if I didn't. Yeah, like, it just feels so right. And the Queensland stuff was cool. And it was actually, that was a last minute NBL 1 invite because my friend, he found out I was there and he's like, well, why aren't you coming to training? Like, you should go. And so I ended up going to his training and his team, and I met some of his players, and I'm actually doing a special project with them. And, you know, so just what transpired out of that, but the people I met there. And and I'm seeing how it works across different states. And yeah, the last year, while it's been difficult in some ways, like basketball-wise, it's probably been like some of the best times I've ever had.
Right.
And it's really highlighted what I love. And, you know, then I bring it back to New Zealand. We see, when we talk about all the time, the women's game is growing. You know, we're seeing more innovations of Tauihi and stuff. And we're seeing, you know, last year we saw how many, you know, girls come back. And then, you know, people like Panina come in, you know, so it's just seeing the spread. So it's just all happening all at once, but it's all intertwined in a beautiful way. There's just something about basketball and the sport community down here that has me by the chokehold, and I would never be ready to give it up.
Yeah, it is a special community down here and in New Zealand. I mean, you know, having gotten to know some people from New Zealand, Maya's a great example.
Oh, I consider her one of my dear friends now. I think she's just such an amazing human, but, you know, to think that we, like, didn't really even know each other until we just like started having this random conversation one day and like, look at us now.
Yeah. There's so much that seems to have happened, not just the last 12 months, but it's been more than that. There's been a lot of things going on, a lot of interesting things have been happening, and there's been a lot of changes happening in the Kiwi hoops arena as well. The evolution of the Tauihi League, especially over the last couple of years, has been something to really keep an eye on. I know some purists look at the Rapid League and they're kind of like, you really need to be doing that. And the truth is, you probably don't need to really be doing it, but it's got some real advantages. There's players who ordinarily would get 0 minutes who are actually getting minutes and getting on the floor. And it means that you're getting to see 2 games on the night if you're a fan. So there's just been so many different things going on. You've been there in New Zealand. You've been able to see a lot of this stuff happening firsthand. So from your perspective, and also from people you've talked to in New Zealand, how has that been coming across?
It's coming across really well. I think the overwhelming consensus is, what we're seeing is positive, and these are opportunities that have been available before. And so to have something like that, especially in the country here, has been a game changer. And honestly, the Rapid League, I've become a massive fan of it because, it is tough for teams that, there's some extra cost involved and can be tough on players and everything else. And there's, depending on what your load is going to be, I can see why people might have some concerns, but I'll tell you, it was great because we saw with Tauihi last year, it was the first go at it. And now they're making these changes, so it's just refining it. And I've been watching it really closely with the men's league this year, with the WNBL. And across the board, both the men and the women, to see the opportunities that these young Kiwis especially are getting and how they're stepping up.
Yep.
Like you said, it gets them highlight tape and, just chances to play. And plus now people are getting, they can use these highlights and use this experience to, if they want to go to the U.S., they can. So now they suddenly have something tangible that they can show. Even if it's just a couple of skills or whatever, they have that available to them. So I've become a fan of the Rapid League. I'm thinking about just overall the change in general. I was at the very first game, the inaugural Tauihi game, when Tauihi was the coach at the Polakai.
Right.
And, just the buzzy and the excitement that was there. Mm-hmm. And the girls who are part of that, and some are so, and some have, gone off and played in different areas. Some have become moms since then, and there have been different changes that have gone on. But, the number of big names, I think that New Zealand's attracted, and just the, Maya and I talked about this a lot, just the step up in play. That we went from season 1 to season 2, and I anticipate this year is going to be even higher.
Yep.
And so it's just, the growth has been enormous. And, I think just overall, just being in the community, it's been great because girls can see it's a tangible pathway.
Yep.
It's going to be interesting to see this year with the date changes and, those types of things, and that you guys and Justin covered really well, which I do want to say thank you for that pod, because I think that did answer a lot of questions for us over here. And so that was, at least it did for me. I was like, thank you. And so I shared that with everybody I knew. It was good to hear that perspective, and so I'm fizzing for it this year to see what boundaries can be pushed even farther from where it was to now. It's just exceeded, but girls are interested in basketball, and we've seen that they love it. We're seeing even the younger ones who are playing Rapid League, or even we're just development players. We're seeing them in the age group teams now, representing New Zealand. So we're seeing their growth too. Yeah, it's all worked out quite nicely, I think.
Yeah, look. In relation to the Rapid League, I remember when it first came up, I got to admit I was a little bit hesitant about it, not because I didn't think it was a good idea, but it was more about the load on the players.
Yeah, and that's how I was too.
Yeah, and also how the coaches were going to try and juggle the people that they were putting on the floor. It's obvious that it's working, and it's working well. The fact that it's also in the Sal's NBL, and from what I can see, the reaction seems to be really positive to it.
Yeah, it's been really good.
So on that basis, I got to say, I think, it's been a great idea, great concept, and it's been really successful. The other thing is that while, there's some tweaks around the rules, it really doesn't move the game too far away from the FIBA rules either. It means that while there's a few nuances to it, you can still have players. They're not playing to rules that are so different that they can't easily slot in if they get an opportunity to play anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, and that's such a great point. And those details matter.
Yeah.
Because this is a great kind of development training for a lot of these younger players, especially these Kiwis. And so, like you said, if they want to go and play somewhere else, the rules aren't going to be so outlandishly different that they can't fare to play in whatever system. And so it's, it's reasonable. And, we've seen that it's proven to work. And I follow, of course, the main Cells NBL game, so I really look at the Rapid League, and especially the Nelson Giants, who I think Justin mentioned. Yep. But those guys, I'd say, are a fantastic example, because most of those guys who are playing are high school boys. And so, it's just kind of furthering their skill set, but it's been a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing that I'm curious to see about this year is the scheduling change, because, I am too. It's hard up against the WNBL. It is a short season. It's 3 months, 12 weeks?
Yeah, 12 weeks. I think is what Justin said.
Yeah, 12 weeks. It's going to be interesting to see who comes to play.
That's where I've been really, and here's the thing, right? Because we've seen Ezra McGoldrick's already resigned.
Yeah.
So we know she's in the bag. So we're going to, okay, that's high caliber player right there. This has been my question all along is, what are some of these offers that players are going to get? I mean, to Justin's point, like he said on the pod, it is a unique situation in that, maybe if players don't necessarily want to commit to just one club in Australia, but they want to play in New Zealand for 12 weeks, which I can definitely attest, do it. It'll change your life and it's the best time ever, but then they can go to Asia, they can go other places, and, they can spend time with their family. And it sounds like they've done some market research and say, okay, players want that 12-week window. So, that proves to be true. Then I'm hoping we'll see some big names wanting to at least show interest in coming back.
Yeah, I'm really interested and very curious to see how it's going to pan out, because it's a big shake-up in the Australian-New Zealand marketplace.
Like what I've heard, because I'm talking to a couple of, I'd say, pretty good sources, and, there's a lot of question marks right now. I think the whole thing with Melbourne and now going to Geelong, I think that posed a lot of questions too about, there was an article Penina was saying, she's weighing up her options. Would she want to come back? Does she want to go somewhere else? Is she, Geelong going to try and keep her? I mean, what's that going to look like? So it's, I think there are a lot of the top players that we've seen in the last couple of years. I think it's a quality problem. What, where do they want to go? What do they want to do? And are they prioritizing the location, how much money they're going to make? I mean, there are all these different factors that go into it. So yeah, we'll see what we get, but I would not be surprised if it's going to turn out to be pretty good.
Yeah, well,
I'm super confident.
Yeah, and on top of that, it's after the Olympics, so that changes some of the calculus for players who are overseas, who are not New Zealanders and New Zealand based.
Well, it was fun because, like, Kennedy Leonard, when I spoke to her, has become a fan favorite. She says normally, so now this was during when the season used to be, which was July, August.
Yeah.
She said she normally doesn't play that time of the year, but I think she injured her hand or something like that. So then this kind of worked out perfectly where she was able to slot in. So we're going to see some instances, is this an opportunity if there's been players who maybe had to take it easier, had niddles or whatever, is this a way to fold them back in?
Yep.
And then they, go up to Europe or whatever. So there's a lot of different scenarios that could happen. And I don't think we're going to know too much until in the next couple of months.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things up in the air, and it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out over the next few months. And obviously, look, the other thing that we do want to talk to you about is, because this is part of our belated 4th birthday podcast, is, you've become a big part of Shooting the Breeze and providing us with input from New Zealand, introducing us to Maya. Those podcasts that we do with you and Maya are always a lot of fun. And also you've been doing a PhD as well. So I'd really like to get your opinion on being involved with the podcast and also everything that's come around with it.
I love being involved with it, and it's just such an honor to be with you guys on the journey. And I also want to say happy belated 4th birthday. It feels like it's been going longer just because of all the content and the stuff that you guys have been able to put out, and your advocacy work just continues to keep going. But yeah, I've loved every single second of it, and getting to know you guys and Swin and all that, and bringing Maya on. It's just been full circle. And I remember finding you guys on Twitter for the first time in 2021, and I was in my bedroom in California. I was like, who are these guys? They look really cool. And I did not even imagine one day that we get to this point. But it's, just as somebody who loves women's sport, loves women's hoops, and to find people like yourselves who align with that, that's just such a great feeling. And going over to the Australian market, it's been something that I've been interested in.
Yeah.
Because we are so close to them, and there's a lot of overlap, as we've seen with either coaches or players, from New Zealand who are going over, vice versa. And so that connection is strong. And so to be able to explore that further, and like the kudos game was a great example.
Yeah.
And really getting to mix and interact and meet the WNBL regulars was, that just means a lot. And I've gotten to meet some really cool people that I probably wouldn't have otherwise gotten to meet, or I would have been less likely kind of being able to interact with.
Yep.
And so it's been a lot of fun. And it just adds on top of the PhD in a really good way. And that's in a positive way, because we have a heavy focus on women's sport there too. So it all complements each other, but it's been a heck of a ride, and I hope to keep doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as soon as you're able to, we definitely want to get you onto the podcast to talk specifically about your thesis and get into that. And I know there's still some stuff that you've got to get squared away before that can happen, but I just want to let you know we are definitely looking forward to doing that one.
I might get a little emotional when I do it, just because I didn't think that, and I honestly didn't think, like, they tell you when you start a PhD, ideally, your supervisor will tell you, you have to pick something that you like, or, you can embrace, because you're going to spend a lot of time with it, and you're going to be the person who's an expert on it and knows it best.
Yep.
Now, I did not paint this kind of picture at all in my head of what this could turn out to be, but it has been really, I feel like, an extension of me, and because it involves all the people that I care about and the people and the relationships I've built here in New Zealand. And so don't be surprised if on that pod I get a little emotional about it, just because it just means that much. And I'm excited to, one of the parts of academia is the writing part.
Yeah.
And I'll say, like, last year with the data collection was some of the best times I've ever had in my life. It was like peak thriving, like where I'm doing data in a beach house, like talking about women's basketball. I mean, this is with a bunch of girls. I mean, it doesn't get better.
Yeah.
So, a beach house in New Zealand, like, come on. So yeah, I'm definitely keen to get on and share it with you guys, and I'll, as soon as we get the remotely okay.
Yep, cool.
We're making it happen.
Yep, as soon as it happens, you let us know and we'll make it happen.
Yeah, and you guys can kind of tell me what bits and pieces you think would be useful, or we could, go through all what we can make a plan on it, because there's so many. I think it could probably take up several podcast episodes worth, just because or just one long 5-hour one, because of how many layers there are to it. Because what we found, and what's been the beautiful part, is every time my supervisors and I talk through the findings or the studies or whatever we're doing, and we have conversations, and we'll have like, oh, that's a good thought. And there's some what we call the meta discussion, which is when we tie all of these ideas that we've had and we tie them into one chapter. And so I currently have this probably the longest running note on my computer that anyone's had. I could challenge somebody else to see there's just all the discussion points that we have. And what's cool is I'm at the point now where we're seeing this story come together, and it's cool. And I didn't plan it this way, so I think it's just what's emerging. So
that's probably
it's gonna be a good one.
That's it. When it happens organically like that, that's usually when you find some of the best stuff. It's
a perfect storm, I reckon. And my supervisor, we often talk about it, he's just like, I can't believe this is kind of how it's ended up. And we had the idea of it, and we've all been super excited about it for, almost 3 years since I started.
Wow.
It's been a labor of love, and just, I kind of liken it to, an elite athlete, because it is a high performing thing where you have to be on your game. Yep. And you always, you have to be open to feedback, and you have to be doing it, but you can't lose sight of the joy. And I think that's what's been probably the coolest part about all this is I haven't, whenever I, because it does get draining and there are things that's telling, why is this not going the way I want it to? I can extract out, okay, I know who this is for. Look who's part of it. But I also want to say, like, being part of the podcast and sharing these ideas and just having the friendship with you guys also fuels that joy and helps restore that too. So I think it's been a nice outlet for when the academic world can get a little too much sometimes.
Everything can. Lyndon, thanks so much for your time. It's great having you here on our belated 4th birthday podcast. And like I said, we're really looking forward to talking to you soon, especially about your PhD.
All right. Happy birthday, guys.
That was lovely.
It was. And it was great hearing from Lyndon and also understanding what being involved with STB is like. And also the fact that, she stumbled across this in a bedroom in California wondering, who are these guys? And, she's helped us to really build that connection with different parts of the New Zealand basketball community.
Yeah, that's how I first connected with her. I think she found us online and she found me online somehow. And then she was doing guest podcast for a New Zealand outlet at the time. And I got to be a guest on that podcast. I think that was 2022. And then I remember after the podcast recording, we were still talking for 4 hours. And that was the first time we met. So it's a reflection of just having that instant bond with a like mind, despite being halfway across the world from each other. But the good parts of the internet and the good parts of sport being able to bring it together.
Absolutely. And as we sort of get to the back end of our 4th birthday pod, there's a few milestones we managed to hit this year, which were pretty big. We updated our website. We had that Asia Cup crossover pickup game with the first subs back in July, which was great. Great day. 150th podcast from Marrickville, where we were live and we had James Jansen on. We've set up an internet radio for doing our live pods, and we also have scheduled content that is now on the radio. Keep an eye on socials and we'll have links to that. We did that first roaming mic pod, which was a bit of a wild experiment at Kudos Bank Arena, which Lyndon was here for. It was a lot of fun. We learnt a lot as well. Probably, the audio wasn't the greatest, but it's okay. And we got the runners-up for WNBL's best overall coverage again. I mean, I take some comfort at the fact that we ran second to News Limited this time. And it's, they're a huge organisation, so I'll take that one. And what about you from this year?
I think getting the back-to-back runner-up for the WNBL Media Awards, that was certainly a highlight. Like, that was a big compliment from the judges panel for the awards this year. But probably doing the orange carpet at the WNBL Awards, that was a milestone and a highlight for me, because it sounds like that's something that hasn't been done before. And it was just also a lot of fun. It was the thrill of doing something live, being able to manage the interviews in real time, as was, because it was live, but also being able to recognize that Mary has grabbed someone else, trying to wrap up something as politely with someone as possible so we can get on to the next one. It was a real thrill. And they always make it look so easy when you watch the live from the red carpet broadcast from an awards ceremony. But, when they've got the earpiece in and they have to go back and forth and make it look so seamless, like, that would be super hard to have your attention divided that way. But it was really, really fun. I think that was certainly a milestone too.
It was a lot of fun. And I've got to say, it was, like you said, trying to manage all of that was going on was pretty crazy, given that it was the first time we'd done it. And I think my highlight out of that one was we got more than 2 sentences out of Chris.
Yeah. That's definitely a highlight as well.
He was a bit more relaxed and he was enjoying himself. So
so that was pretty cool. That was very cool. That's also maybe perhaps a once in a lifetime opportunity.
Okay, Jacinta, thanks so much for jumping on for this one.
Yeah, definitely.
Make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you get our latest pod. And we really appreciate if we could get a like and a review so we can extend the reach to more listeners. And don't forget, follow us on Instagram, Twitter and LinkedIn.